Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today, we're going to be talking about IDP Week 14 recap and a prediction for Week 15. Here with us today is a special guest making his first appearance with Front Office Pros, which is none other than Matt Montgomery. Matt is a IDP writer for Footballguys. Matt, thanks so much for joining the show today.
Hey, thank you for having me on. I'm very, very excited.
Yes, we're excited too. Joe couldn't make it tonight, but you and I were here and ready to talk IDP.
He's missing out.
Hike.
So, Matt, going back to Week 14 here, who was your stud of the week?
Oh, I think it's got to be Ivan Pace, linebacker for Minnesota. He has come on very strong here of late. Last 3 games, he's had an immense amount of tackles. I think he's had 9+ tackles in 3 straight games. Had the bye week in between this 3-game stretch. So 3 of the last 4 games, or 4 weeks, he's had an extremely large uptick in his production. Part of that is because of Jordan Hicks' injury. But at the end of the day, he was showing us the ability to do this at the beginning of the year. Lost some snaps, lost some favor with the coaches. Not quite sure what happened with him there, but I do know that now that he is the only man really healthy for that linebacking core, he's getting the statistical nod. They're playing 3 safeties in this defense to kind of help alleviate that, but he is the main man in the middle of that defense. And at the end of the day, you want guys that are playing on the field, they're getting volume because volume equals stats.
Yeah, I was just going to say about Jordan Hicks. With him, I believe he went on IR, and because of him going on IR, it opened up the door for Ivan Pace, and I think that's so pivotal, especially in IDP circles. You know, it's the next man up mentality. And usually the next man up, he may not be as elite as the player before them, but they could be pretty good. Because like you said, there's a lot of volume, a lot of opportunities. I think about even from a Bills standpoint, right? I remember with Matt Milano going down, I'm like, oh boy, who's going to step up? And then you saw Terrell Bernard, and Terrell Bernard has been unbelievable. Anytime you see, I think mostly, definitely for the linebacker position, maybe not, I don't know if it translates as much on the defensive line. I think like safeties and linebackers with a lot of tackles, I could see both of them kind of, it's whoever's that next man up could be really good. But Ivan Pace is interesting when he was undrafted out of Cincinnati. And like you said, he was, you're from Cincinnati. Were you following this guy? Did you think he should have been drafted?
Oh, I'm a huge Bearcat homer. That I would be lying to you if I didn't say that didn't have something to do with why I'm so hyped that he's doing well. But at the end of the day, we're both dynasty fantasy football fans, and when you're doing full IDP dynasty leagues, it's almost the war of attrition. What are you willing to put up with? What are you willing to see on your roster week to week? And when you have an undrafted rookie that got significant playing time and statistics in the first 2 weeks of the season, it's very hard to forget that when he has that mid-season lull. But if you had the diamond hands and you held on to him, and now you've made your playoffs somehow by hook or by crook, and you're going to get to ride this performance into your fantasy playoffs, why wouldn't you want to start the Bearcat here? 9+ tackles, 3 straight games. That's all you need to know. He finished his year against the Bengals, the Lions, and the Packers. There are going to be plenty of tackles available. The first 2 teams, the Bengals and Lions on there, they both run with 2 separate running backs. So he's going to have immediate opportunity to tackle the ball carrier, and he's proven that he can do so when given the opportunity. So it'll be a pretty cool homecoming for Ivan Pace to go back to Cincinnati and play the Bengals, and I expect him to have a pretty big week this week.
That's a great point. Totally forgot about that story behind the scenes there.
Shout out to Cincinnati. It always comes back to Cincinnati.
Oh, is that so? But yeah, I agree. I think Ivan Pace, he's going to be lights out the rest of the year. We'll be interested to see if he continues with that job going forward because there's not a lot of draft capital. Kind of reminds you of Agent Jack Sanborn. Kind of came in out of nowhere in Chicago last year, and then they got.
He was a darling.
He was for the last few weeks. He was a darling, and then they go ahead and they sign Tremaine Edmonds, and then they sign T.J. Edwards, and now he's nowhere to be found. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Vikings going forward. But I'm with you for the rest of the year. He's a smash play. So my stud from Week 14 is going to be edge rusher Harold Landry. He's a guy I've talked about in the past as a dud, and he's starting to become more and more of a stud. He was an absolute menace against the Miami Dolphins. He had 5 tackles, 2 hurries, 3 sacks, a total of 5 QB hits, So that's going to be the 3 sacks plus the 2 QB hits on top of it. He was second, according to PFF, in their pass rush grade of 85.2 on a total of 51 snaps. And here's the thing. This was without Jeffrey Simmons. Jeffrey Simmons is one of the best interior defensive linemen in football, and he doesn't have that interior pressure, and he was still causing so much havoc. I got to tell you, man, I am really excited to see Harold Landry go back to the Harold Landry that we knew before he tore his ACL.
Oh, absolutely. So I have a couple of points I'd like to add on to that. One of them is a question that I'll save for the end here because I want to get your explanation for why you feel as though he's a dud, because I'm kind of the opposite here. You know, he's that consistent player. If you're building a foundation and you know, okay, I need a guy who I know that I'm going to put him in every week and he's not going to come away with a goose egg. He's going to give me that solid floor that I know, okay, I'm safe playing this player, and every now and then he's going to pop. Like you mentioned last week, he had arguably his best game as a pro, it felt like. So he's one of these players that he's never going to burn you. And I think that in fantasy football, specifically IDP, that is a very underrated part of a player's game. I don't want to question if you should play. If I'm questioning whether you should play, I'm almost questioning why you're on my roster. Harold Landry never gives you that question. You know, you're going to put him in there. He's consistent. He's only had one season under 44 tackles. It's funny that you mentioned Harold Landry because I just wrote my stock market article for the week, and the first 2 players on my list are Ivan Pace and Harold Landry. So we are locked in on our first pod together. But I'm telling you, I think that he's the type of player that if you're trying to build a solid dynasty contender, he should be a foundational piece for your edge. He may not be the guy you start every week if you can find a better guy who's got the pop, like a Nick Bosa, you know, a Micah Parsons, a Max Crosby. But if you're looking for that next tier down where it's like, man, you know, who's going to be the guy that isn't going to burn me, who can also get a sack? Harold Landry fits that bill almost perfectly.
Yeah, I think when it came to Harold Landry, why I had him as a dud originally in the year was just because of his slow start. You know, heading in, you're talking for the first 5 games, he really didn't do much at all. He did have 1 sack against the Chargers, but other than that, he really did nothing. Then against Baltimore, Atlanta, he racked up a couple sacks, and he kind of. So later on, he's been a lot better. I just think I was worried about his ACL injury. But yeah, I mean, look at what again. I keep talking about the Bills, so I apologize. But look at Von Miller, right? He's a lot older. Von Miller has looked horrible this year. He's been absolutely just nowhere to be found. So it's one of those things where it's like not a guarantee that he recovers back to his old form. I think he's starting to now. He's been doing really good. So I'm with you. I like him a lot. I mean, from a dynasty standpoint, he's 27 years old. We know that edge rushers can play late into their career. They can play up to 32, 33.
I was going to say,
no problem.
Probably 2 to 3 more prime years, and then after that you'll get bonus years, but I still think that they can be contributors. And a couple of final notes on Landry. We're going into week 15, right? So since week 10, he's had 33 tackles and 4.5 sacks. That's absurd. Okay, ride the hot hand while it's there, even if he's just that consistent guy, because you know, okay, maybe he's not going to have 6 tackles and a sack next week, but you know he's going to contribute to the game. So if you have a league that benefits big play scoring and he can maybe have a sack force fumble and it benefits you, he's showing right now that he's on a different level. And final note, he plays the Texans 2 of the last 3 weeks. We don't know what Stroud's going to be like, so he could be going against the backup quarterback, which is always good for an edge rusher.
So are you enjoying this video so far? Well, if you are, show your support to our new channel by hitting the subscribe button and liking this video. We'll be creating videos all NFL season long, so you're not going to want to miss what we have in store. Head over to the duds for the week. Who do you have from week 14?
All right. So I might get some pushback for this because there is a body of work here that I could just fall flat on my face, but I am just a little perturbed about Jordan Whitehead. I am a safety lover. I probably carry way more safeties and defensive backs than a sane person would in a dynasty league, but I just believe that they're arguably the most versatile players on any defense. They have the big build and body to stop the run, but they're also expected to play against the pass. So they have to have elite athleticism too. So if you can find that hybrid guy that can do both at a high level, the expectation is he should be able to perform and affect the box score just as much as he's affecting outcomes of games. Jordan Whitehead this year started off amazing. He started off the first week, he had 3 interceptions. My Lord, you're never going to do that. Okay. You don't expect that week to week, but the next week he had no defended passes and 9 tackles. So it's like, okay, here we go. We got a guy that's going to fill out the stat sheet. And then finally, week 3, 10 total tackles. Since then, he has had just 3 weeks of 8 or more tackles. And 8 tackles is a lot to expect of a safety. But when you start off the first 3 weeks with 9, 10, and then 3 interceptions, and then you go to 4 tackles to 3 tackles to 3 tackles, and then finally last week with 1 solo and 2 assisted tackles to your name, I'm over that. That's the type of player that I believe can lose you a week. When you go in there with a high expectation and you put one of your coveted starting spots and you're going to a guy that has proven to boom, I don't think that this is not the time of year to take a risk in your lineup. This is the time of year where you know who is going to produce and how they produce the best, whether it's, you like the matchup, who they're playing, you like the scheme, you like what the coaches have been doing with them, or vibes. If you're a vibe guy, I just believe right now, if you're a vibe guy, Whitehead is not the person that you want to play, and I believe that he can burn you down the stretch.
Well, I think the one thing looking at his stats over this year, he's very pass deflection dependent. When he does get it, and it depends on how your scoring is too. Do you reward highly for pass deflections? If you don't, I highly would recommend that you do, because I think it's really a important stat when it comes to the secondary, especially. But I think that's the hesitation I have with him. I mean, like you said, he really hasn't done much since the Vegas game. Yeah. Which was back on November 12th. So we're talking
9 tackles and an interception that game.
We're talking about a month ago that he really hasn't done all that much. So I'm with you. I'm hesitating starting him, honestly.
So I will say that if to play devil's advocate to my own point, he does play against the Dolphins and the Browns in 2 of the next 3 weeks. So he does have good matchups against teams that are airing the ball out. Say what you want about Joe Flacco. The dude's balling right now. So he's going to throw the ball down the field, and Whitehead's going to have opportunities for those big play interceptions. Like you said, whether it's a tipped ball or whether he just happens to be at the right place at the right time. And obviously we know what the Dolphins are doing on offense. So there's going to be an opportunity for him to score. I just do not have the stomach to put him on my playoff team.
Well, and the Commanders too. Commanders. That's another juicy matchup. So yeah, I'm with you. He's an interesting one. You're either going to play him and you're going to get burned, or he's going to be on your bench and you wish that you put him in there.
Yeah, I'll let you know if I start him, because then he'll go off.
Yeah, right.
He won't go off. Like, if I start him, he's going to go off. So I'll post it.
So my dud, this will be a little bit of a shocker as well here from Week 14. It's going to be edge rusher Brian Burns from the Carolina Panthers. He had 1 tackle and 1 tackle for loss. He only had 6 sacks on the year so far, Matt, and he's scheduled to be a free agent next offseason. My question to you is, what did the Panthers do? They had, basically 2 first-round picks on the table from the Rams, and they passed on it. So I don't know where he's going. If the Panthers are going to re-sign him, number 1, maybe they franchise tag him. I mean, Panthers right now are a mess. Number 2, what did dynasty owners do? Because he has had a pretty disappointing year. Is this just an anomaly of a season? He's going to go back to the Brian Burns that we know going forward? What are your thoughts there?
So I have no insight on what the Panthers front office or organization is like. But if I know, right? But if you read the tea leaves and you start looking at story leaks and how they get out and, who is responsible for the story getting out, everything points to David Tepper not having a very tight-knit organization that's kind of got each other's backs. I think that they took a risk when they didn't trade him and they tried to go all in on Bryce Young. I think we're seeing the Bryce Young experiment may not be correct. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's just an organizational failure, and I believe that's demotivating. Because you also have to think that one of his counterparts, Derek Brown, is an elite interior pass rusher in his own right. So there's 2 people on that defensive line that are what I would consider to be elite, not only IDP options, but just defensive pass rushers. And the Panthers are really just not looked at as a competitive franchise. I believe that it could get ugly for them this offseason with him. I feel like he has to get out of there. It's almost like free Brian Burns. He's too good of a player to be stuck in an organization that's quite clearly not as professional as others. This is coming from a Bengals fan. We were a laughing stock for quite a while. Okay, so I'm not going to throw stones in a glass house because we got Joe Burrow and it was suddenly our organizational problems were fixed. But at the same time, you have to understand that when you have positive momentum, it affects more than just, oh, hey, wow, we have all these fans and now the organization is making more money. Well, when you become a product that is successful and you're winning, people will feed off that. If you have a tight-knit team with a strong leader, whether it's the owner and David Tepper or the head coach, which they've gone through 2 in season now, 2 years in a row, if you don't have stability, you have nothing. So I think that the first thing they need to do is just figure out what they are as a team and then understand that, okay, do these elite players fit into what we are, or do we need to move them and find players that are that?
Real quick, in Dynasty League, are you trading for or trading away Brian Burns right now?
I think you got to buy him now. I think he's about as low as his value will go, and I don't believe that he's going to do this long term. I think it's kind of like who was the guy that got traded to the Bears just recently?
Montez Sweat.
There you go. That's a great example of a guy getting out of a bad situation. And maybe the Bears aren't a great situation, but just you're seeing a remotivated player who's like, all right, new beginning, new me, right? Everybody does the same thing. You get out of a bad relationship and suddenly you're hitting the gym and you're changing your hair and everybody feels good about everything. I feel like that's what happens in the NFL as well, but obviously on a different scale. You're playing for millions of dollars. You're trying to stay relevant. And a lot of times people will have that second team stigma of like, okay, he wasn't good enough to be signed with his other team. When in reality, he may not, just like the organization he worked for. We've all quit jobs. We've all moved from jobs. So you go to that new place and suddenly you try to be better than you were at the last place. And I think that Brian Burns can be that player, but on an NFL pass rush team, and he's already an elite player. Imagine if he goes somewhere that can support him and his talents. I'm a buy low guy right now.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. But heading over to week 15, we're going to give our IDP Pro tips of the week. So, Matt, what is your prediction for week 15?
All right. I wanted to make a splash on my first appearance here. All right. So I was like, you know what? I'm not going to throw out the easy ones, start Max Crosby, right? Start Foye Oluokun. I'm saying that you need to go out, figure out how you can get Jordan Howden, the rookie safety for the New Orleans Saints. Okay. He has not had substantial playing time this season, but only in 2 games. Okay. So in week 8 against the Colts and last week against, ironically, the Panthers. So Howden in those 2 games has 8 tackles in week 8 with 1 pass defended. And then last week had 10 tackles, a sack, a forced fumble, and a pass defended. All right. This guy is a rookie. He is playing in place of Marcus May, who was just moved to IR. So he has got the kind of the green light right now. It's a little late in the season for a franchise that's not exactly contending for them to really make a move that's going to cost them money. I think they're going to just roll with what they have. And if they can rattle off a few wins here and somehow capture the division, I'm not sure what their mathematical probability is. I know that division is not exactly clinched yet due to just the ill-fated teams in that division outside of the Panthers. We all kind of know what's going on there. But Howden, he's an out-of-nowhere guy, and I feel like every year we have 2 or 3 players that just pop up right as the fantasy playoffs start. It's almost like the fantasy gods go, hey, if you can stomach playing this guy on your team, you will be rewarded handsomely. Like you said, Jack Sanborn, that's a great example. 2 years ago, it was like, who in the world is this guy, and why is he tackling? For the people that are a little bit older, if you remember Chris Borland for the 49ers back in the day, okay, he was like unbelievable, okay? And my favorite person ever was Donald Payne of the Jacksonville Jaguars, who ended up being the XFL Defensive Player of the year after he helped me win a fantasy Super Bowl because he had 3 straight weeks of 10-plus tackles, okay? Every now and again, you're going to get a guy that just drops right into your lap. And I think that this year it's Jordan Howden, and I have nothing to back that up other than the 2 games we've seen. He's been fantastic. He's playing a majority of snaps. His competition, his direct competition is on IR. And I say competition, but it's his teammate. He's on IR. And honestly, he passes the vibe check. Come on here. He's a young guy trying to make a name for himself in the NFL, and he just had his best game of his life. You don't think he's going to carry that in to the next 2-3 weeks? He's 23 years old. He should be a dynasty target. Even if you don't have the stomach to play him in your playoffs, pick him up, stash him on your dynasty roster, and watch this thing. Watch him grow. Watch him grow into an elite player, because right now he's showing us at 6 foot, 209 pounds. He fits the bill. He can do this. He can be a playmaking safety, and he's got 2 games of relevant playing time, but in both of those games, he was elite, and he was an elite fantasy option.
Honestly, I can't see why someone wouldn't be able to stomach it. I mean, like you said, Marcus May is on injured reserve. So now, Jordan Howden is now stepping up into the starting role. This past week against the Panthers, like he says, he's getting really full-time action. He had 10 tackles, 8 of them solo, 1 sack, a forced fumble, pass deflection. I mean, you really can't get better than that. So to me, it's like, that production. Obviously they've got the likes of Alante Taylor, who he kind of plays more the nickel. And then you've also got the Honey Badger in the back. But, their linebacker core, is not the greatest, right? So, you've got Pete Werner, who has been a disappointment, I feel like, this season. And then you had, Demario Davis, the veteran. So I think at the end of the day, I don't know how much of it a gamble is, honestly. I think it's a great call by you. He's got the Giants, the Rams, and the Bucks going forward, which are okay matchups, I'd say. With the amount that Kyron Williams is getting the rock, as well as Saquon Barkley, I think I'm with you. I think you definitely got to start this guy.
And really quick, the last 2 weeks, he's played 98%, 95% of snaps. And then in the week 8 game that we mentioned, he played 100%. And then also, sneaky stat, week 3, he played 100%, but all of these were due to Marcus May injuries. So he is the man that's stepping up. And I'll say this till I'm blue in the face. Snaps equal production, and production equals fantasy points, and fantasy points equals wins, and sometimes money. Don't overthink this.
So my IDP Pro tip of the week for week 15 is going to be to start interior defensive lineman Kobe Turner. Now, you might not have to start defensive tackles. And Kobe Turner is not a household name, but the 3rd-round pick out of Wake Forest has done quite a good job this season for the Los Angeles Rams. Over the last 30 days, according to my home IDP league scoring, Kobe Turner has the 6th amount of points in that span. He goes up against the Commanders, which honestly I probably don't have to say. By now, if you play IDP, you should know that is an absolute juicy matchup with Sam, otherwise known as Sack Howell, at quarterback. So you got to roll with any defensive lineman going over and playing against the Commanders. And here's the thing. Aaron Donald is literally getting triple teamed right now. If he's getting triple teamed, guess what? Kobe Turner is going to go unabated to the quarterback and get you some points. Like I said, if you have an interior defensive lineman starter and you have to start a DT, you got to start this guy this week. I think he's going to do really well.
Heck yeah, man! So that's an impressive pull. You see, I felt like I was pulling a big name here, and then you kind of throw me out there.
Yours is a much bigger pull than yours is a much bigger pull than me. And Kobe's been doing really well. Maybe I would have done it like 6, 7, 8 weeks ago, but he's been good all year. He really has.
No, I think we're seeing the learning curve for some of these guys. And like you said, a lot of it comes down to who you're playing with. Who do you play with on the same team? Aaron Donald's getting triple team. Somebody has to get open. If you can't get open in one-on-one coverage in the NFL, you're probably not going to be around for long. There's a reason that, not every single play people are one-on-one. There's a reason that defensive coaches, or offensive coaches, will help scheme different blocks. They're going to scheme the different sides based on where the play is going, what the quarterback's comfortable with, yada, yada, yada. But at the end of the day, the NFL is a one-on-one game. Open field tackles. Can you bring that guy down, or will that running back put you on a poster? One-on-one, if you're trying to sack the quarterback. You got an edge rusher, you got a left tackle or right tackle. It's one-on-one. Can that guy give his quarterback enough time to make a comfortable throw? When you have a guy like Aaron Donald, who is also winning at an alarming rate with these triple teams, which is a whole nother conversation in itself. But you have that guy garnering so much attention, and whether the quarterbacks say it or not, they are always thinking about where that guy is. when you start focusing on a guy that heavily, that intense, kind of like you talked about Von Miller, and the decline is very sad, but at Von Miller's peak, it did not matter what side of the field he was on. The quarterback always knew, he was always pointed at, he was always schemed against. Players like that open up opportunities for the other guys, right? It was Greg Gaines for a little bit last year when he was a Ram. So there's an opportunity for a player like him to get point production, but most notably sacks. Sacks get you more than just tackles. And if you can get 1 or 2 a week, beautiful.
So, Matt, thank you so much for joining the show today. Before we sign off, I've got 2 asks of you.
Okay.
1 is, where can others find your great work? And 2, I know you like building dynasty teams. Who is your one surprise of the year, and who you think could maintain it going forward?
So you can find me. I write for Footballguys.com. I write a weekly Dynasty IDP stock market piece, as well as do the forward projections for the Draft Dominator app. Love it. Wonderful team there. Very supportive group, very nurturing, understanding. There's an expectation that we have for our writers to give our customers, but at the same time, there's no idea that's not listened to. It's a very inclusive community, very, very good work culture. It's cool to talk football with some old heads, right? And I say that in jest. They're so wise. They've taken me and helped me become a better writer and a better football fan, honestly. So outside of that, I'm on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. I'll never be able to call it X. It's Twitter. It always will be. And I'm there at Matt Monty FF. I'm always posting, I don't know, random nonsense, mostly football, but every now and then I'll throw like a lawnmower thought out there and just try to stir up the masses. And hey, sometimes we can't take ourselves too seriously. But as far as a surprise of the year, so this is a tough question because I think that there's a lot of ways you can answer it. I like to, at the beginning of the year, try to think about what is something that we all expect to happen that's the most likely not to happen. And my big stick my neck out there prediction of the year was Micah Parsons is not the 1-1 in IDP. And I don't believe he should be the 1-1 of IDP. And then the first 2-3 weeks of the year, I looked like an idiot, which is fine. I love that because let's talk about it. Let's talk about why, okay? I think he's had a great year. Don't get me wrong. He's Micah Parsons. He affects the game. The reason that he hasn't had the pop year that he has is because teams are now worried about him so much that they try to just remove him from the game, and he still finds a way to impact the game. So as far as I'm not going to take a victory lap on a Micah Parsons not being 1-1 because that's a pretty bold thing, but I also was a huge fan of Jalen Phillips. And while Jalen Phillips was healthy, I believe that he is a top 5 talent in this league. And I think that if he can stay healthy, he will be a guy that we talk about moving forward as one of the best edge rushers in the league. And to his credit, in his absence, Andrew Van Ginkel has been a pleasure to watch. The dude is absolutely on a tear since Phillips has been down, which is something I never thought that I would ever be able to say, that you can victory lap on a Van Ginkel, but I've been on Van Ginkel bandwagon since about week 4 when the first injury for Phillips came. And it was like, hey, for whatever reason, this guy's just got the magic elixir this year. When he's getting his opportunity, he looks more like Thor than Alex Anzalone does, and he's playing like the God of Thunder. So I believe that he needs to be one of those guys that we talk about this year. Don't let him be a flash in the pan. Andrew Van Ginkel has been a very good player to watch, and I think that we should, give him his flowers a little bit here because he's one of those guys that's kind of unsung, but he's having a good year, and I think we should appreciate that.
Well, Matt, thanks so much for joining us today. Next week, we'll be back again for our Week 15 IDP recap with the Week 16 prediction. Hard to believe we're in the playoffs. Hopefully, some of these suggestions are going to help you win your matchups and head on to the next round. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.